Okay, welcome everyone to our Tanya Outside In, and at the behest of Gabriel Haran, we're doing a quick recap. So last week we recapped chapters 1 to 9. Yeah, so we could say just as a super recap of the recap, number one introduces your lower self, which is basically scared to not be and desirous to be. Yeah. Then chapter 2 introduces the Nefesh Elokis that couldn't care less about being, in fact, would rather not be, would rather just merge with God. Chapter 3, we started talking about the structure of the soul, which always divides into Seichel and Midas, Chochmah Bina Das, and then Av and Yira. Chapter 4 started discussing the concept of the Levushim, the concept of the clothes of the Nefesh, yeah, which is basically thought, speech, and action. Um, Chapter 5 spoke about learning Torah, what that means, why that's after you've spoken about the garments of the soul, then you should speak about the food of the soul. So information is the food of Torah is the food of the Nefesh Elokis, yeah, and YouTube is the food of the Nefesh of Bahamas, unfortunately. And like they say, you are what you eat, yeah. Um, then chapters 6, 7, and 8 basically introduce the concept of Klippa, whether we're talking about Klippas Noiga, Klippas Timaeus, and Kedusha, the concept of the Kalim, of what things are contained, of what the divine light is contained in, and that gives us the structure of reality. So, number 9, chapter 9, we kind of move into a new Shlav. I've called this, I summarize chapters 9 to 15 as the inner struggle, because 9 to 15 now starts putting the pieces of the puzzle together. We've now got clear what the pieces are. Yeah, like we said, we have the mortality of the Nefesh of Bahamis, we have the infinity of the Nefesh Elokis, then we have the structures, we have the clothing, we have the food, we have the raw materials of this world, which is called Klippa, etc., etc. Now the Rebbe starts putting all the pieces together. Okay, so chapter 9 is basically discussing the the um the interaction between these two, for all intents and purposes, opposite beings. And that's where free will is born, true free will. Yeah, that in Chabad we call Bechira Chofshis, not Bechira. Bechira is born, the Nefesh Bahamis has Bechira. The Nefesh Bahamis can choose between, you know, not only can it choose between a Porsche and a Ferrari, yeah, it can even choose between a Ferrari and investing money in a hedge fund to get a dividend much greater in 20 years. That's also in the domain of the Nefesh of Bahamis. That is not a free choice. That is not a Bechira Chofshis decision. That does not involve the Nefesh of Kis. Bechira Chofshis, by definition, means that you're choosing between God and something else, not just Madregas and something else. The Nefesh of Bahamis cannot choose God. It can only choose in Madregas of another, of the other, Sitra Achra. Yeah, it can choose for more selfless, less selfless, or something that's going to be bigger or smaller that could appear later, etc. So now, once you've put the Nefesh of Bahamis and the Nefesh of Kis together in the goof, so to speak, now we have the actual now the game commences. This is the game, okay? And he um, he explains what the game is. The game is who gets the keys to the car. He describes it as two kings in one city. Yeah, but you could easily describe it as a fight between you and your wife and who's going to drive. Yeah, that you're the car, and or your body is the car. Yeah, and not just your body, like the faculties of, it's a bit more complicated if you want to make it more complex. But it's now who gets to drive the car? Is it the Nefesh Bahamis or the Nefesh Elokis? Only one person can sit in the driver's seat. So that's what the fight is. Who's going to sit? Who's going to listen to who? Is the Nefesh Bahamis going to listen to the Nefesh Elokis? Or is the Nefesh Bahamis going to put the Nefesh Elokis in a dungeon? The Nefesh Elokis does not listen to the Nefesh Bahamis. That's not how it works. The Nefesh Bahamis
It
listen,
can
and
be only one.
but the relay, remember, when it's only one, it's see, this is the thing, is if you choose reality, yeah, you choose to dedicate yourself to Torah and mitzvahs, yeah, that's called reality. If you choose to dedicate yourself to Torah and mitzvahs, your Nefesh Bahamis is mamash throwing a party. Your Nefesh Bahamis is being used for reality, and it's mamash. It's on a deeper level, it might not appear that way, but on a deeper level, it's very, very content. If we choose not reality, if we choose ourself, then what happens is not that the Nefesh Elokis gets drafted into that the Nefesh Elokis gets stuffed in a dungeon. The Nefesh Bahamis has no need or use for the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Elokis needs the Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Elokis can't do anything. So it's a funny kind of battle. If you choose reality, yeah, the blue pill, then 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 everything is in line. Everything is in alignment. And the Nefesh Bahamis is also happy. It's like your kids, yeah? Like what a nightmare it is to get kids to bed. The amount of the amount of energy I've spent in my life. If I could have all those calories that over the past 20 years trying to get my kids to sleep, and I've got one, they all do it actually, but Yochanan is a master of it. He's old enough, he doesn't, is you'll be, your C is up. You'll be, Yochanan, go to bed. And he'll get up slowly and he'll walk to bed. And then you'll get, and then you'll realize 10 minutes later, he's sitting there again. He slips back out. He slowly slips back out. You don't notice, and he's there again. And it can happen 5 or 6 times in the night. He goes off, so you get distracted, and he's back again. Either way, but I got distracted. The point is that the Nefesh Bahamis, just like the children, are actually chalishing for to be dominated by the parents in a good way. I mean by good parents, not they are chalishing to be guided. They're chalishing to be given schedule and order. They're chalishing for it, and kids who don't get that it's a disaster. It needs to be done for the child themselves, but that's what the child wants, and that's what the Nefesh Bahamis wants. He wants to be drafted for Avodas HaKodesh. He really does. Yeah. And the moshel is that he gives in chapter 9 is the moshel of the Zona with the famous moshel from the Zohar, where the king, wanting to test the moral fiber of his son, hires a Zona to tempt him. So she is a dedicated servant of the king, but she has to make a real show because that's what the king wants. He really wants to test his son. So although she's doing her best to tempt the son, the prince, she secretly, internally wants him to succeed deeply. She wants him to push her away. You with me? It's the most perfect muscle there could be. So when he actually refuses her, yeah, she is delighted. And if he doesn't refuse her, she's heartbroken. That's the Nefesh Bahamis. That's mamash. Exactly. That's how he finishes chapter 9. Okay, so now he moves into chapter 10, which is the definition of the tzaddik. And we can spend a lot of time on this, but let's try and say it really, really simply. Okay, everyone divides in truth. We all divide into one of two. Again, it's not about you, so don't worry about you, yeah? But we divide into one of two categories. Everybody can be called either a tzaddik or a rasha. That's really it on the very low resolution. On the lowest resolution image, yeah, Jews are either tzaddikim or Rishoyim. Okay. Now, once you turn up the resolution a little bit, you'll realize there's this category called Benoni, which is basically a Russia. The person is a Russia, meaning he has his own agenda. Don't think that a Russia means he is a demonic, satanic, malevolent, force for evil in the world. Russia in Tanya means he's got internal noise. He's got his own agenda. Russia is from Russian Rash. He has his own internal agenda, but he doesn't pay attention to it, and he acts correctly. So in many ways, he's more holy than the tzaddik. He's what the whole story is about. It's about a normal human being, a normal Jewish human, yeah, who is behaving correctly, thought, speech, and action. So he is a Rasha who is behaving like a tzaddik. He himself is no different to the Rasha internally, but Lemaisa, he is infinitely different. He's infinitely different than the Rasha because he's behaving himself. God is real to him. He is not godly. The tzaddik is godly. He has been, so to speak, displaced by godliness. Whereas the Benoni is a human being serving God. He is, what was that I said before? It was a good way of saying it. The is a he the Benoni is aware of God, and the tzaddik is godly. And so when we're talking about the tzaddik, we're talking about a man, primarily the regular tzaddik, not the tzaddik v'toivloi, not the ultimate tzaddik, who's a completely different creature than the tzaddik v'raloi, the tzaddik she'eino gamor in the Tanya. The tzaddik v'raloi, yeah, or the tzaddik she'eino gamor, is the highest level a human being can attain, which means it's a human being. His sense of pleasure is still intact, but his emotions have become completely holy, completely godly. So if you were to offer him something treif, he would be repulsed. He wouldn't have a struggle. The tzaddik, that again, the tzaddik she'eino gamor that we call him here, the tzaddik in the Tanya that's not the incomplete tzaddik would be somebody who does not have a struggle with not looking at bad things on the computer. If this guy had to deal with a computer and a bad picture popped up, he would feel revolted. Revolting? Revolted? That's not the right word, is it? Revolted?
Correct, revolted.
Yeah?
He would be revolted, or he would not be revolted.
He would be revolted, not he would feel revolted.
Right.
Yeah, he would be revolted. He would feel completely disgusting by seeing that image. Why? Because emotionally he is completely in line with Ratzon Hashem emotionally. But on the level of the essence of his animal soul, which is called pleasure, yeah, that is not godly. That's still human. So therefore he is a human being for all intents and purposes, but again, really, for all intents and purposes, he's displaced that because his emotions are completely holy. So his sense of self, he has a sense of self that is bound up in godliness. Whereas the tzaddik gamor, there is no sense of self there. From on a human perspective, on a human level, his humanity has actually been transformed into his humanity has been transformed into reality. That would be a nice way of saying it. That his nefesh Bahamis has become godly, whereas the tzaddik she'eino gamor is a human being who is a human being who is godly, meaning he has a sense of self, but it is identified with godliness, with God. Whereas the total tzaddik, the very essence of his humanity, has been transformed And therefore, I don't think you could even say there's any kind of sense of self. But those are the two levels of tzaddik. The complete tzaddik who's a completely different on a completely the difference between the complete Russia and the tzaddik she'eino gamor, the incomplete tzaddik, is infinitely smaller than the difference between the tzaddik she'eino gamor and the tzaddik gamor in Tanya. The two levels of tzaddik, the higher tzaddik and the lower tzaddik, yeah? The difference between the lower tzaddik and the higher tzaddik is the difference between creation and creator. The difference between the Russia, the complete Russia, and the incomplete tzaddik is lots and lots of madrigas in creation. Is that clear? A little bit? Okay, so now just I suppose as tangentially quickly is that the big I suppose thing that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was trying to give over is that in our generation we are now available to serve on the level of the Tzaddik Gamor through however history has worked itself out, however we find ourselves in the reality of our situation, yeah, we are now capable of serving Hashem on the highest level, and that is what this organization is about. And I think I was saying to Yitzi today, and Benjamin, you said this just now, is it's not really an organization, it's actually a movement. It's a movement towards avodas Hashem Lishma. That's what it's towards. And that is that is everything that I've come after all the learning that I've done, everything that I've learned, it all boils down to that, is we need to teach ourselves and all other Yidden how to serve Hashem Lishma. And that's called B'nai Aliyah. That's what a B'nai Aliyah is. That's what a Ben Aliyah is in the Tanya, the way that the Rebbe drushes that Maimar Chazal from Rebbe Shimon is that we are here to what used to be available only to the Yechidim Mamash, yeah, the very very elevated people of the door is now available to every single Jew, and that was the message of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the way I understand it. Okay, chapter 11 now discusses the Russia. The Russia, again, is a man. Don't think that the Russia is this Ted Bundy character, Yimach Shemoy. The Russia is a man or woman with their own agenda, who has their own sense of self. The difference in the Russia and the Benoni is that the Russia will occasionally, and it could be very, very occasionally, give in to their agenda. Now this is where it becomes really interesting, and actually I thought this one time I saw this beferish in one of Rav Yoel Khan's farm, is that when you think of it like this, you just the definition of Russia, and not the lower Russia, or whatever, but they're basically the same thing in a sense, just more. That the definition of Russia is a human being, is a Jew who has a sense of self, has their own agenda. Yeah. Now, what would that look like if that person got brought up in a certain place where his whole basically it means that when you really think about it, a Russia doesn't actually have to be somebody who does an Avera. It's just somebody who can do an Avera. A Benoni can't do an Avera. Why? Why can't a Benoni do an Avera?
His seichel doesn't let him.
Control.
You see what you say?
He's in control.
He's in control. There's a really clever way of saying
Because he
it.
identifies with his nefesh elokus.
No, Love Dafka, that's not true. That's not true.
We said he thinks of himself as a tzaddik.
But that doesn't because he could be a Benoni if he has a really a Benoni basically is a Russia who never does an Avera and only does mitzvahs. Now the ultimate level of the Benoni, the way the Tanya describes it in chapter 12, actually, we might as well say it now, is the Benoni who doesn't sin because it's just not true. It's not true of who I am. That's a very, very elevated Benoni. It's just, well, how could I sin? Even though I want to do that Avera, but it's just not who I am.
No, that's not true. But it is who he is.
What?
Who he is that he's attracted to us to Averas. It's that it's not right. He knows the cost benefit analysis, whatever it is.
That's it. That's it. That you just said it beautifully. He can't afford to do the Avera. Why can't he afford to do the Avera? Well, that's a different story.
It's up to him.
Depends. It could be
either because he doesn't want to go to Gehenna, or because he
Yeah.
wants to get scarred Olam Haba, or because it's going to break his identity as thinking he's a tzaddik.
Exactly.
Whatever.
That's the point. Either way, he can't afford to do the Avera. It costs too much. So he can't do it. He can't do it. That is the definition of the Benoni. He can't do the Avera. Why? Because it costs too much. Now you could say that with a man with his wife, yeah. You get a man who could potentially be unfaithful to his wife, Rahman al-Islam, yeah. And then you've got men, or I hope most of us, who we could not be unfaithful, yeah. You should never think that, yeah. But Lemaisa, you could not be unfaithful. Now, but that could come down to many different reasons. And it could be very, you might say in your head, well, I could never do that. I'm not an adulterer, that would be a very, or if she found out, yeah, and we get divorced, chas v'shalom, yeah, or it could be, I don't want to hurt her. She deserves more than that. But it's not like there's only one woman who exists in the world. And the idea of adultery is just, well, what do you mean adultery? Like, who would you be adulterous with? That's what the tzaddik says. It's like you're like, well, could you ever commit adultery? And like, I don't know what you're talking about. What's like? What do you mean? You mean like be with another woman? What are you talking about? Another woman? What? I'm not understanding. That's the tzaddik. There's no concept of another woman. Whereas the regular husband, the good husband, the nicest husband would be saying something like, well, that wouldn't be true of me. That's not an accurate representation of who I am. Not, oh, I'm gonna, we'll get divorced and it'll be a nightmare. That's not. So it comes out now that the Russia, according to the Oimek of Tanya, doesn't actually have to have done an Avera. It's the efsharut of being able to do an Avera. It's the possibility of being able to do the Avera. Because he can afford it, but maybe the opportunity never presented itself to him. Maybe he grew up in such a frum neighborhood where there's always kosher food. People just don't speak Lashon Hara. He's what in chapter 15, what he describes as the Benoni who's like plateaued out. She'ena Oived. But that could be not a Benoni. That he would only be kind of technically called a Benoni because by default he's not doing an Avera. But you realize Aliba de Emes, he's actually defined as the Russia, is defined as the incomplete Russia. It's a din on the possibility of doing an Avera. So a Russia can do an Avera, a tzaddik can't do an Avera, and a Benoni can't do an Avera because. That's a nice way of remembering it. The Russia could do an Avera. Now there's lots of different levels of Avera that you could do. That's the Russia is a sliding scale. The Tzaddik can't do an Avera because to him it's repulsive. It's not. It's he doesn't like Avera because he's aligned with God. Whereas the Benoni doesn't do an Avera, can't do an Avera because fill in the blank. That's the Benoni. So then on that level, there's Madregas of Benoni. There's the selfish Benoni who doesn't want to go to Gehenna. And there's the selfless Benoni who this just isn't true. This isn't an accurate representation of who I am. That's a very elevated status. So that's the Benoni. And who was it who said he had Yitzi thing? He said he had control, yeah? So he has control. So that's the exact next thing that the Tanya says in Perek 12 is that he has what's called Moich Shoyle Alalev. That means his mind rules over not the feelings of his heart, because then he would be a tzaddik. His mind rules over the aspect of his heart that compels. Is that the right word? That compels behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah, compels you.
Compels you. Okay. So when it says the moich is shola alalev, the mind is rules over the heart. It means the mind rules over the part of the heart that is responsible for behavior, which means he never does anything wrong, but he wants to. He feels he sees the pleasure, but he can't afford it. So that's the Benoni. And then chapter 13 and 14 are like a further kind of explanation on a more technical term and a more technical what's the word? On a more technical level, where in truth, chapter 13 is a very, very important chapter. Gabriel, you know why chapter 13 is an important chapter? This is very unknown. The chapter 13 is an extremely important chapter because it's really where the Rebbe explains what Bechira Chofshis is, what true free will is. That's the place in time. If you want to learn about free will, the Rebbe explains it in chapter 13, very clothed in very, very, very simple clothes, but it's tremendously deep. And then really chapter 14 is kind of a chizuk about being the best Benoni you can. And then chapter 15 then describes the two types of Benoni. Well, really, the one who the Benoni who serves is the one who's actively involved in the war of fighting the Yetzer Hara, of fighting his own selfishness. And the Benoni who doesn't serve is what we just described basically as a Russia who never gets round to doing an Avera because the opportunity doesn't present itself. So those are the two styles of Benoni. I think we'll hold it. Next week we'll catch up in chapter 16. Okay, shkoyach.
Thank you, Rebbe. Have a good night.
Shmuel, my friend.